Welcome to the new episode of the All Walks of Life podcast. In today's episode, I've interviewed Anirban Singh Roy. Anirban Da is the academy administrator at Quess East Bengal Football Club. I refer to him as Anirban Da in the episode because being born in Bengal, we generally refer to someone who's elder to us as Da to show a sign of respect that Da generally means that he's in a sense my elder brother. In today's episode, we talk about a range of topics at great length because generally, whenever me and Anirban meet, we do share similar interests. A few of the topics we spoke about were how a club, in our opinion, should have an overarching philosophy which should range from the younger age groups to straight to the first team, so the transition from the youth setup to the first team is seamless. Moreover, we also spoke about Chuni Goswami, who was a stalwart in Bengal society, having represented Bengal in several sports like hockey, cricket, and even football, and being sensational in all these sports. So it was a great conversation I feel that we had, and it would be great if you guys joined in as well. So it's just that, and hope you enjoyed the podcast. Hi Nirvanda, welcome to the All Walks of Life podcast. Hope you're well.
Yeah, I'm good. What about you?
I'm good. How have you been keeping yourself busy during the quarantine period?
Well, I've been reading up on stuff, basically sports books and periodicals and a few biographies and autobiographies, catching up on footage of old matches and stuff. I've got a pretty decent collection. So, and also the YouTube websites are also streaming, so I'm catching up on that from there as well.
Any books in particular that you've been reading recently, or
Sorry?
any books in particular that you've been reading?
Yeah, I have basically been reading a Paul Scholes biography, which I got, I think, sometime last year, but was unable to complete it. But now that I've got time, I've been reading that. But actually,
So
not that.
is there less work pressure from the club, or is there anything that the club's giving you to work on right now?
See, currently, since the season has ended, our senior season ended quite some time back, and also the youth season ended before that itself. So currently, there's not much to do, but a bit of academy accreditation stuff which we were doing before the lockdown. So basically, that's only happening.
Oh yeah. Also for the listeners, if you could give like a little brief about yourself and how you started working at East Bengal, basically.
See, I have done my sports management qualifications from ISWBM from Calcutta itself. So after that, I joined a sports management company and was working there. It was basically a sports branding and marketing agency sort of. And they were majorly into cricket, but also a bit of football as well. But I was always keen on working in football. So after working there for some time, say around a year and a half, I left that and I was looking for opportunities in football. So applied in a few places like Bangalore FC and the Boca Juniors football school and stuff. Then luckily for me, got this break in East Bengal in say, I think it was April 2018. I got the break and joined the club and started working there. They had a vacancy in the youth development program. They were looking for their academy manager and I joined there. And it was good fun working with the kids. And also we had one of the best persons basically in India, youth development in Ranjan, who had been working in the Tata Football Academy and also the youth setup of Pune FC before East Bengal, and he's a very renowned person, one of the best youth coaches in India basically. So it was a great learning experience working with him.
Yeah, no, I mean, working with Ranjan sir was a great experience for me as well. Like I think with the amount of experience he has and the vast variety of players he's coached, not only in India but abroad as well. It's a great learning curve, and he's quite the character as well. Like, I mean, he's quite political, and he is very he does follow an ideology, so that just makes him a fun person to be around as well. Also, so you mentioned, so the last time when we spoke, when we met in Calcutta, you were part of the your role was academy administrator. So are you still working closely with the academy, or are you looking more into accounts and contractual basis as well now at the club?
Basically, I have to look into everything, starting from the administration of the academy, and also the contract situations, player signings, a bit of football analytics, starting from the scouting stage till the competition stage, player programming and stuff. So these are the things I have to do, and I have been doing, and quite enjoyed. And other than that, besides that, we have got 3 age group teams, which is U13, U15, and U18. So majorly been working with the under 18s, but even the under 13 team and the under 15 team was under me as well regarding the admin part and the non-technical part. So I've been helping in that as well.
So how do you think, like, since your stint at East Bengal, how many players have you seen progress from the age group, say from the under 13s to the under 15s and so on, and eventually making the first team? Is it very rare, or do you think that it's becoming more and more popular with clubs like Bengaluru SC and other clubs popping up who are following this roadmap?
Yeah. We had a few players coming through the ranks. If you're talking about the senior team, you would know Manoj.
Yeah.
Muhammad, who was basically the captain of the under 18 team in the 2017-18 season, under 18 season, and we also won the FA Shield under his captaincy only that season. So he did well that season, and when eventually got into the senior setup for the 2018-19 season, and he got to play. He got more than a decent amount of games to play in that season, and he did more or less well. So he basically is one of those players who stands out, who have come through the under 18s to the senior setup. And other than that, there have been a couple of players more who have also been pushed into the senior setup, but they haven't really had that much of game time. But obviously, even being on the bench in the senior setup is good exposure, I believe. So it would have done them a world of good. And this season, if you're talking about those players, they would have been spending their second season with the senior setup. The players which I mentioned, Manoj being one, the other would be PC Lupuya, who also was with Manoj the same season. We won the FA Shield, and both of them came to our senior setup from there. And both of them are still with the senior team. Obviously, the game time would be an issue, but it must be great experience for them being around the senior setup and the squad and mixing with the foreign players and also the experienced Indian players which we have in our squad. So
no, that's a great thing, because when I was working for East Bengal as well, I mean, I clearly saw, like, in the training sessions, because I was there in the pre-season time, that Manoj actually stood out in terms of the other players that were there when he was training with. But I feel that it's a success for an academy in any sense that if they can even get one representative into the first team, and not just into the first team. Manoj is, I think, he's a regular starter at East Bengal, so I feel that that's a great thing. But another thing I wanted to focus to you about, and something I feel really strongly, at least in my coaching philosophy, if that's still growing rather, but is that I would, as if I am appointed a head coach at a football club, I would really like there to be a platform. So I would like my under 18s manager or my under 23s manager to play a similar kind of football, to play a similar kind of style to what I would implement in the first team. So the transition from the youth setup to the first team is so basically there isn't a transition. It's smooth. It's very smooth. So what do you think of that, and what do you think of the situation in Indian football? Is it getting better, or is it still very political of how the under 18s head coach would stick to whatever he has in his resources just to get the results and save his job?
Yeah, as you say, if that is possible, like you implement one philosophy of play throughout all your age group teams, which is completely in alignment with the senior team style of play as well. That is basically the best case scenario. And we see that in European football. I think Ajax does that. Even Barcelona, to some extent, does that. And if you're talking about India, I think FC Goa is trying to do that. Not sure about Bengaluru, but I guess they would also be trying to do that as well. But here in East Bengal, since the pressure to win from the fans, and obviously being a club which has won so much over the course of the last 100 years, whatever be the tournament, whatever be the tournament profile or the standard of the tournament, there is always a pressure to win, be that in senior team football or youth football. So it becomes a bit tough, but obviously the aim is towards that only, to develop one style of play for all the age group teams, which is in alignment with the senior team, so that it becomes much easier for the players to transition from one step to another as they go along their journey. So obviously that would also take quite a bit of time. It's not like it happens very quickly. It is kind of a progression. So I'm sure that will happen with time.
That's interesting you touched upon FC Goa, because I've been looking at them for a long time now, and from the circuit that I have and the people that I know of, they're speaking really highly of the management setup that's there at FC Goa, because there's an ownership that is passionate about football and sports as a whole, but they are giving responsibilities to people who are more professional, if that makes sense, and they are letting them handle the ship, which is difficult to say, because some of the traditional Indian clubs haven't been able to take that very well. That there's been generally a power struggle in most of these clubs. So what are your thoughts on that? And do you think it's sort of going away now, the legacy club tradition of being power hungry?
Obviously, with these models being like examples for everyone, for every club throughout the country, like say Bengaluru FC and FC Goa, even the legacy clubs, as you say, like East Bengal, Mohan Bagan and Mohammedan, are also trying to imbibe the good from them and trying to implement those practices into their own system and trying to change for the better as well. Still, it's also an ongoing process. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. But obviously, if the aim is towards that, like imbibing the best practices from the best models in the country, then I'm sure basically the clubs will be on the right path, which is the heritage of the legacy clubs.
No, that's really nice.
What did you think about FC Goa's sacking of Sergio Lobera? Because he was pretty highly rated, and even though he failed to win a title, but still his style of play and overall his success in the ISL is praiseworthy, really.
No, it is, but I think they recently signed this Spanish guy. I think Juan. I think he's come over and taken reins. I mean, to be fair, I haven't looked into what he was bringing to FC Goa in terms of the playing style and things. But from what I'm guessing, I mean, this is not an expert comment or something, because they have a new leadership in progress with a new director of football. And the way they're trying to run things, maybe they have a new vision in mind, and that's why they're trying to get another Spanish coach into the league. I think that's become it's become quite fashionable for Indian clubs to have a Spanish head coach or some kind of Spanish upbringing in their setup. Don't you
I
think?
think that revolution was also started by BFC. I think they had
Yeah,
Albert
yeah.
Roca, who was
Yeah.
basically the first high-profile Spaniard
Yeah.
in the head coach position,
I
and
was
after that,
I was speaking about this topic with another guest on the podcast. I think the first one, Ganeshan. So I told him that it's very pattern based in football, and I can't just criticize Indian football for this because I gave him the example of Antonio Conte bringing 3-4-3 to the Premier League, and then every other coach in the Premier League reverting to the 3-4-3. Even Arsene Wenger, who was traditionally a back four person, shifting to a 3-4-3. So I can sort of understand where they're coming from, but the way Indian clubs have taken it, it's bizarre. I mean, so I raised the point that Indian coaches are getting discriminated against in their domestic league, which is unheard of. I mean, I don't think any other country would have that their domestic coaches are getting discriminated against.
oh, if you're talking about that, I think even in the Premier League, which is like such a global league now, you see the English coaches hardly getting much chances in the big clubs. There are English coaches, but
if you take the 20 teams, I'd say that there are still 5 English coaches in the league. There isn't a single Indian head coach in the top division of Indian football, is there?
But that was more because I think the ISL had a regulation you had to had a foreign head coach. That's why there were a lot of A-license previous I-League winning coaches who were working under those foreign coaches as assistants. So even though that rule was pretty bizarre, but that came into being, I think, from the first season of the ISL. But now I think from next season onwards, it's changing. I think you can have a Indian head coach, basically, and someone with an AIFFA license. You can have as the head coach of your franchise from next season onwards. That's what I am in the know. So that's good if that happens.
Yeah, I feel because
that's good if that happens.
Yeah, I feel because that would bring a systemic change, because if there are young coaches in the circuit, they'll probably see an Indian face on the touchline at one of these ISL clubs, and they'll be motivated to say that okay, my journey isn't going to be a waste, because I can see a general path for myself. That if I do work and get and follow the right tracks, then I will maybe be able to become an ISL head coach one day. But today I just feel that that's really not possible. I feel that the highest that they can maybe aim for is technical director or things along those lines at a grassroots club or something. So, but yeah, there's also this whole thing about the licensing and how these federations weren't giving out licenses just like that, because I feel that there were an amount of really good coaches coming out, but then the certifications weren't there because of corruption and politics at the highest level. I think I was speaking to some people. They said that there were some ex-players who came in and they didn't have to attend one day of the workshop, and they got the licenses. And there were people who were putting the real graft in and who've been coaching and showed their whole portfolio, where they've coached, how they've coached, and they just didn't get it. So do you have any particular thoughts on that, or is that just another thing of the hierarchy that Indian football is right now?
Yeah, as you say, I've also heard about this, but it's unfortunate if it is true. Obviously, there must be some truth to it, and that's basically out. But obviously, if you are good and you do put in the hard yards and the graft, as you say, ultimately, eventually, you will shine through and you will reach a certain level. But obviously, coaching is like that only. See, even Pep Guardiola started in the lower ranks of the game. Like, he was Barcelona B team coach. He was successful in his first season itself. I believe he won the Segunda, and then he had that great offer of being the Barca senior team head coach. So obviously, like playing.
But that was different. Anirban, that was different though, wasn't it? Because from what I've heard is that Mourinho was in line of getting that job, but Barca really believed in that philosophy. They said that okay, Mourinho might be a good coach with good ideas and things like that, but if we have this guy who's from our academy and he's done really well with our academy, why can't we give an experiment of giving him the job and seeing how he'd do? I don't think that's maybe in the years to come, maybe a club like FC Goa or Bengaluru will adopt that approach of them promoting their basically promoting from within, being an organic club in that sense of not only promoting youth players but even coaches, so that coaches can also work their way up. I don't think that's too far down the line. I feel.
I think Liverpool used to do that, means since Bill Shankly's time, and the assistants he had ultimately became head coaches one by one after each having retired. So that was a good to keep things in house and basically to make the transition smooth. I think that's a very good plan. Obviously, otherwise we see the cases of say Man United or Arsenal who have had coaches for such a long time, for so many seasons together, and when these coaches have ultimately moved out and left, and the transitions have been so very difficult for both the clubs. So that model of promoting from within is, I think, a very good model, and if you can do it the right way, that would definitely be of great help.
I'm actually going to give a very hot take over here. So many people might not agree with me, but I feel that okay, many people have Steven Gerrard to be in line for the next head coach of Liverpool, but I don't think I wouldn't want that as per se, because I'm not sure if you've heard his name, but Pep Linders, who's the current assistant to Jurgen Klopp, he's like very highly rated, and like he's also been offered many first team jobs, but he's wanted to keep close to the Liverpool setup because Liverpool, like the backroom staff and everyone sees him like the heir to the throne, basically, like because they understand that Klopp can only stay for a certain period of time, and he's after some point he is going to get exhausted of the rigors of the Premier League and management as a whole, and they are going to promote maybe Pep Linders to get the first team job, which other big clubs may think that you aren't getting a big name, you aren't getting Carlo Ancelotti, you aren't getting someone along the that caliber. But I feel that's a really good approach, and I think that more and more clubs should adopt it, because people are now moving towards what Liverpool are becoming successful in: good recruitment, getting good youth players in, and the youth players following the same setup that the first team has. I think it's only time that the big clubs, other big clubs rather, follow the template that Liverpool are trying to set.
Yeah, obviously, if you can do that, that would be the best, because, but it's also quite a bit of a risk, because as you say, someone gets promoted after the previous manager leaves to the head coach's position, and if it doesn't go that well, then obviously the fans will question the decision. So obviously, I don't know about Pep Linders. Maybe he's currently the assistant of Klopp for the senior team, right?
Yeah.
So whether he'll have experience elsewhere, as in say he will be coaching the reserve team or something of that sort in the reserve league, and see how he goes before he's given the job. I don't know what Liverpool have in mind with him, but I think the Pep model was a good model which Barca did. Basically saw him succeed with the B team and win the Segunda, and then obviously that gave them their confidence to make him the head coach of the senior team. So
from the inner hearings at like Liverpool, from the people I actually trust, some journalists, they say that Klopp has become very Sir Alex in his approach to management now. So he's generally just on the fence, just having he's very hands off now. He's just having a watch of the players having being trained, and I think I've raised this point on other platforms that he's becoming more like that. He brings a new head coach every season, even though he's the head coach. So Pep Linders is in charge of the whole first team setup. Obviously, Klopp, if he feels that something is wrong, he's going to come in and give his inputs in. But it's Pep Linders who takes on he takes on the theory into practice, if that makes sense. And I feel that that's becoming very common, because at university as well, one of my lecturers, he's a close friend of Chris Wilder, and he spoke to him, and even Chris Wilder, he's gone on in years now. I think he's close to in his 50s. So it's more difficult for these older managers to actually go onto the training pitch and actually perform these drills. So even he mentioned that the newer age of coaching is that they bringing in these younger assistants who basically act as their as what they would want on the training pitch. But yeah, it's very Sir Alex in that sense.
Yeah, even Sir Alex used to do that. Basically, the training sessions used to be taken by the assistants like Carlos Queiroz and Rennie Muhlenstein after that.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's Mick Phelan as well. But there have been a lot of good coaches, as in who are basically good coaches in terms of developing players regarding taking great training sessions and stuff. But management of a club obviously is a lot more than that. Other than just coaching players, modern day management is so much more. So obviously, you may be a great coach, you may be great at improving individual players, but still to be the manager of a top club, one of the biggest clubs in the world, you need to have, I think, that X factor.
Basically a personality at that point, don't you think? You're basically in a way that your club brands you to other markets, because football clubs are becoming very much like how NBA franchises operate or IPL teams operate. That they basically they're trying to go over to the world, because it's this concept of globalization which I've spoken about. So so Manchester City, in my opinion, they're kind of the pioneers of it. I feel that with their multi-club approach, they still have one philosophy that's running around all their sister clubs, and it's playing beautiful football. It's whatever may be their manifesto, and I feel that is the future of football, because I feel that some people may be up in arms about the European Super League, but I feel that for these clubs to make more and more money, and that's how I see it going, it is almost inevitable that we'll have a European Super League, that there'll be a pot of 10 teams maybe who'll be playing for 6 months, 8 months, and the rest of the teams will just be put into a League 2 system, which is currently being played in the country. Do you think that takes away from traditional football and traditional fans like you who've been watching football for so many years, and what do you make of that?
I really don't like the idea of the European Super League, which has been bandied around. But obviously, it's only beneficial to the top club, as in the clubs in the higher echelons of the Champions League. So obviously, for the traditional side of football, it's going to be very bad, and the traditional fans who basically the purists who want football to be the way it has been, say, for the last 100 years, since proper structured league football or the league system started, they wouldn't like to see a European league sort of. It would basically spoil the charm of the game, because now you have the individual leagues in each country where you have at least 18 or 20 teams in every top flight league, and there is so much means. There are a lot of aspects of playing against such teams, and if you're only going to play against the big teams, I don't think that's going to be that enjoyable. The romance of, say, playing against a smaller team and the chances of that team causing an upset, those kind of things I think would be lost. So
one very interesting thing to consider is that if you look at the Champions League and the winners of the Champions League of the last 10 years or 15 years, it's been very much focused on East Europe versus West Europe. And West Europe is totally dominating on how the Champions League is being operated in terms of the finances, in terms of the money, the winners rather. I mean, teams from East Europe are just struggling. So don't you think that's also a kind of divide, and that could just be created as the European Super League as well?
If you see, say, before the Champions League era, which is basically the Champions League started in the 1992 season, before that, the old European Cup era, you had teams like, say,
Red
Star Belgrade winning, then you had Hamburg winning, you had in England, we've had so many teams winning the European Cup, other than, say, the big teams like Man United or Liverpool. You've had Aston Villa, you've had Nottingham Forest, and also other teams, even though they may not have won, they've reached the latter stages as well, like, say, Leeds United, Derby County, Tottenham Hotspur and stuff. So, and now it's become totally different. Basically, there are only a handful of clubs who keep winning, say, like the likes of Real Madrid, Barcelona. Even the Italians are gone now. You don't see AC Milan or Inter or Juve. Juve obviously is still there or thereabouts, but other than that, it's become difficult for the Italian, even the traditional powerhouses of Italian football, to go close to winning the Champions League. So obviously, what I see now is that earlier, I think the spread of good players used to be a lot more, as in you had more clubs with very good players and there was kind of a balance. And now there's a lot more concentration in one or two clubs of basically the Galactico players. So I think that's come about because of the spending power of those two or three big clubs, and they ultimately weaken the other clubs by buying talents from them and just holding them in their own club, even if they really do not need them. So
that's a very interesting point, because I was listening to the Statsbomb podcast, and they raised this point about Phil Coutinho, of how even though he didn't fit in at Barcelona, there were only a handful of clubs that could reasonably afford him, and that's why he went on to buy on loan to Bayern and things like that. And even though he's performed well in patches, he hasn't stamped his authority at Bayern, and this could be seen with players like James Rodriguez. It'd be almost impossible for, let's say, a club in the lower half of the Bundesliga or the lower half of Italian football to even get these players on loan, because the kind of wages these players are on, it's astronomical. So there is already a divide that's being seen. So is there a way that we can normalize football, or is that even a term that's of the past now?
Not too sure about normalizing, but yeah, obviously the financial fair play, now that it's come about, it is trying to curb that sort of a wild spending spree, which I think Chelsea or Man City did when in their initial seasons of their takeover. I don't think now that Newcastle United takeover is on the horizon, I don't think they will be able to do what Chelsea or City did, say, in the 2000s. It's going to be much tougher for them, because now you have the UEFA financial FFP, and then you also have the Premier League FFP to contend with. So it's going to be much more difficult for Newcastle United in that sense, but still, obviously, they'll be much better off than they were under Mike Ashley. So,
what are your thoughts on the Newcastle takeover? Do you have any such things?
What I've been reading a lot of stuff lately about that takeover may not actually go through, because there are some human rights issues with the Saudis. So the British government may just interfere and just tell the Premier League to.
Do you think, I don't know, I'm probably being a little cynical here, but the amount of money that the Saudis are willing to plow into the UK, don't you think that will actually play some sort of role? Because if you see, I'm not sure if you know about this, but they paid 100 million just to get Anthony Joshua to Saudi Arabia to get one fight on one night. That was just nothing for them. That's 100 million spent on one night for Anthony Joshua. From what I've been hearing is that they are 10 times as rich as the Manchester City franchise. Obviously I understand that they probably won't be able to spend it all at once. They'll probably have to have a good plan in place. But do you really think a country like the UK will be able to turn down that amount of cash? Because it may just do so well for their economy or other things.
as I'm hearing, if it's a human rights issue, then it becomes really difficult, because then there's government intervention and things become really, really sensitive. So I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure.
Let's just take it in this way. Like having dictatorships, I generally don't understand the strength of these bodies now, because I've kind of lost hope on the WHO as well after the remarks on Taiwan. Because I feel that the WHO are just in bed with China at this point, and they're just getting the funding from China. So from an individual's perspective, in this modern age, I generally do not know which source to trust and which not to. So I totally understand on a human scale the human rights issues that are associated with the Saudis, but on the other hand, someone in the UK government will say that that there are these human rights issues, but can we really turn down so much money coming into the league? So obviously, which may be totally bad for the country, but that's how sometimes economics work, and that's how sometimes that these politicians do operate with the strict budgets that they have to play with. Because if you consider the whole coronavirus situation that we have going on as well, most of these economies will be probably have to be rebuilt. Some of them are saying that most of them will be pushed into deep recessions, if not depression. So it's something to consider. I'm not saying it's a right thing or not, but it's definitely a point to consider.
Yeah, even I feel ultimately the takeover will go through, even though these issues are also being raised, because ultimately, as we have seen lately in the Premier League, it's about you have the money, you can own a club in the Premier League. Ultimately, that has happened, because if you see the Chelsea's ownership, and then after that Man City's ownership as well, and also you've got so many foreign owners now in the Premier League. So ultimately, it will go through, but obviously the FFP regulations need to be very stringently put into place, so that I don't think there's any violation regarding that. And the clubs with massive cash reserves are unable to take advantage and manipulate and maybe do that to their advantage, and big squads and stuff, expensively assembled squads.
Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? Like you mentioned, if you have X amount of money, you can buy any Premier League club, if that makes sense. Do you think that's a good thing when compared to the Bundesliga model, which is catered towards protecting the fans and what they actually care about? But then someone on the flip side can easily say that if you are going for this kind of approach, you do protect the fans who do come for the games every week, but you aren't able to progress in the Champions League, which is what most Bundesliga clubs may strive for, if that makes sense. So it's a good balance to play. So do you think that after a point the Bundesliga will turn to say that we have to entertain the new money, if that is, to come in just because we want to compete with the UK, or do you think that they will stick to their fans?
I think the Germans are very national team centric, so the Bundesliga model helps them in that way, because as of now, whatever is the Bundesliga model, which is basically, I think that some 49 plus 1 rule or something of that sort.
50 plus 1 or something like that.
Yeah, so some kind of a rule like that. So the main advantage of that rule is that your young players from the academies of each of the clubs in the Bundesliga get to play in the senior team, because it's not like a Man City squad where you have so many big players just sitting on the bench, just warming the bench. So how is a Phil Foden going to get enough exposure and stuff? So that is basically in the long term detrimental for your national team, because you may be losing out on developing a great talent into a very good player for your country. If that, or maybe that talent will have to leave the Premier League, as in Jadon Sancho has done, and some others may be contemplating leaving the Premier League for other leagues to develop themselves. So that the Bundesliga is basically probably the best league for youngsters to develop themselves. You see, Erling Haaland rejecting United and joining Dortmund. One of the major reasons for me would have been the exposure and the game time which he would receive there, rather than coming into a Premier League club where obviously there are big squads with big players and it's much more difficult to break through.
But Anirban, the one thing to consider with Haaland is that his agent is Mino Raiola, and we can easily one thing to consider is definitely Dortmund was the right move for him because the Bundesliga is very similar to the Austrian Bundesliga, so the transition is a little better for Haaland to move to Dortmund. Plus, Dortmund isn't as big a club however you may perceive it to United, because in terms of expectations of fans and how United is a worldwide brand. So one can easily say that, but another person can easily say that Mino Raiola just made him because he can get multiple paychecks then. So he knew that the United move was definitely going to go through in the future. Why not I make some more money by bringing him to Dortmund first and then getting another 100, 120, 130 million in the future when I get him to United, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Even that side of the argument has been bandied around. Say, a lot of people have been saying United refused to pay the agent fees because of their tensions with Raiola and stuff. And anyways, he was asking for quite a huge chunk in the form of agent fees. So I'm not sure what the truth is, but obviously, if you're thinking from a player's perspective, say you're a young player or I'm a young player. I think going to leagues like the Bundesliga is much more beneficial than going to, say, a more global league like the Premier League, where obviously the top teams have got huge squads and it's so difficult to get into the senior setup. I think United, after Ole has come in, has done well in that regard. They've again gone back to their old methods of promoting from within, giving youth a chance, giving their academy, the real good talents from the academy, some sort of a chance to showcase their skills for the senior team. And that's good, at least, with Ole coming into the senior team's head coach role. I think Germany, in that sense, because of their structure in the Bundesliga, the national team gets benefited hugely because of that. Their youngsters develop much better. You see the likes of Timo Werner and also the others who have basically come through the ranks and are slowly now coming into the own for the senior team. So I think the Bundesliga model, that sense, in England, I think the club rivalry is much more, and they really are not that interested with the national team. I don't think not interested would be the right word, but obviously the club takes the precedence. The club rivalries take much more precedence than international football or the performance of the England national team in the major
Scouts over English. That's definitely true, I'd say. There was another point I wanted to raise. So my thing was when you mentioned about Jadon Sancho and players like Reece Nelson moving to the Bundesliga to get their first fair share of minutes to play professional football, don't you think the Bundesliga would just turn into a feeder league in that sense? That these bright English players are going to the Bundesliga to showcase their talent, and their parent clubs, if they feel that they're good enough, will then call them back and maybe assert them into the first teams. Those in the Bundesliga then has to be a little smart, saying that we will have them.
I think the Bundesliga's economic model or the model to sustain is like that only. They buy cheaply, they buy young players for a cheap price, and then they develop those players in their system. They make those players into big players, and ultimately they sell off to the bigger clubs for a huge fee. So basically the sell-on value, they take the maximum advantage of the sell-on value which these players would be having if they manage to reach their potential. So that's the economic model I think they have been following, and it's good in that sense. Otherwise, it's tough
Yeah.
Economically, you may be in a bit of a mess if you keep on buying,
Yeah.
making huge transfers, and ultimately the revenue
It's
not that much for your club.
Yeah, it's just
Ultimately,
unsustainable after a point. You just can't sustain that kind of spending power. So you touched upon Ole and him bringing players through. Where do you actually stand on Ole? Are you Ole in or are you Ole out?
well, as of now, I would like to give him a bit of time because this is only his first full season. And if you see the progression graph, uh, even till what 1 month into the new year, it wasn't really looking that promising.
Yeah.
After they lost back to back to Liverpool and Burnley, and it really was looking very, very tired. But after that, he got Bruno Fernandes in the January transfer window, and things have looked up a bit since then. Obviously, he's been a great addition to the squad, and if football resumes this season, I would assume would have Rashford and Pogba back as well from their long-term injuries. So maybe a strong end to the season can be expected with more or less a full strength squad. So for the West, but other than that, the thing about him is that he tactically he may not be at the level of a Pep or a Klopp who are much more experienced at the highest level than him. But the thing which he has done well is he has got back to those values of United, which is giving you the chance, promoting from within, and he's tried to build the club up, rebuild rather the club up in that way after the disastrous reign of Mourinho and before that Van Gaal and Moyes. So and he's also
No, I have had United fans. They did say that they don't totally agree with everything Ole is doing, but they see positives in his time in charge, and that's why they are persevering with him, however much longer. But I'd like to talk about a wider aspect because of the whole coronavirus pandemic. What are your thoughts on what should be done with the Premier League? Do you think it should be suspended like the French league and I think there was another league. I'm not sure now. Yeah, the Dutch league. Or do you think they should take measures like the Bundesliga of how they are probably going to resume at some point?
Well, as of now, with the pandemic and the effects still really heavy, I don't think people can even think about restarting football. But obviously, they are putting a plan in place for, say, a June end restart or maybe a mid-June restart. But it's really very difficult because no one knows. This is such an unknown quantity, this pandemic, and there's not too much of information even to the medical experts regarding the virus as well. So you really can't put a finger on when this is going to completely go away or it's going to be good enough to at least restart and play games behind closed doors because as of now, still there are so many people dying in the UK and all the other European nations. So it really doesn't look nice thinking about football at this moment in time.
That's totally understandable. But yeah. So what was I gonna actually say? Yeah, it's more about the pandemic. Do you have any idea or of when you think normalcy will actually resume, or when we'll actually be able to go back out and just live our normal lives? Do you think it's as close as next year, September? Do you have anything in mind? What are your thoughts?
I think this year would be tough. Maybe next year, until basically a vaccine is come up with, it's going to be really tough. Means even if the curves are flattened and say the rate of infection, the death rates also drop, still people will be apprehensive and there are going to be restrictions and the physical distancing part will continue. So I think this year it's going to be a bit difficult, but at least things will improve, say or at least we hope things improve from June onwards. That would probably be the earliest because we are already into May and June would be next month. So maybe this month would be tough, and if things to improve next month, it's going to be good.
You speak about
Next month, it's going to be good.
you speak about the vaccine thing. You know what's the scary part? Like, it's like influenza. It took us as a society to develop a vaccine in 18 months to 2 years, which is, and for us to actually expect a vaccine right now, it's like, I mean, I'm not even sure with the medical, with however much medical sciences progressed in the last few years, that how long it'll actually take us to get a vaccine out. Because from what I've been hearing in terms of the reports, there have been various variations of the coronavirus that have been spotted in India, and like it's asymptomatic in the sense that people aren't being able to make out if they actually have it because they don't undergo any symptoms. So it's like a really peculiar one, and something that I think society should be really scared about. I understand that I understand that people aren't dying in the numbers that it did in the Spanish flu or something, but still to consider that if you can actually get infected, that's a big blow.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's so much of it is unknown, even for the medical practitioners. Most of the doctors are saying we hardly know much about this virus and stuff. So it's really difficult to predict. And also, as you say, the virus has now mutated into. I think I was reading somewhere there's been, I think, a far greater number of strands of the virus now than it was previously.
Do you buy that argument that it's a bio-generated virus, or do you think that's a conspiracy theory?
I really don't, but I do believe that story. I don't know whether that's a story or the truth, but whatever I heard about that accident in that virus lab in Wuhan, which is basically the biggest virus lab or one of the biggest virus labs in the world. I think that patient zero got infected due to the accident in that lab, and basically he or she was the person who was responsible for spreading.
I actually do believe it because so the DNA, the genetic DNA that was taken out from the bat that actually caused the coronavirus was the same genetic composition that was being studied by a group of scientists in, I think, in a research facility, I think 5 kilometers away from the food markets, which is totally obscene. I mean, first of all, I don't trust anything that's coming out of China, be it statistics of the number of people that have died or anything that they might have to say. But I genuinely feel that this can genuinely be a bio-generated virus, because I think this has similarities. I was listening to someone talk about this today, that during the concentration camps as well, I think Nazi Germany were also implementing something like this, that they had they are scientists designing bio-generated viruses to basically take over the world in terms of it being very harmful. So I don't, and especially in a dictatorship like China, I don't see it being too much of a long shot that it's not generated. Anyways, that's something that we've been suffering from. So I generally feel strongly about that. But I wanted to talk to you about Chuni Goswami. He's recently passed away, and I understand that I grew up in Calcutta as well, and you've stayed there most of your life. And I think you told me about how your father was one of his biggest fans, and he'd watched him play back in the day. I would just like to hear your perspective on Chuni Goswami, and maybe just share some stories that your father may have told you back in the day, or anything that you may know about him.
Yes, so Chuni Goswami was not only a football hero, but he was a sporting hero from Calcutta, because such a multi-sport talent is rare. And I don't think anyone from Calcutta can match up to that. He was not only a great footballer, he was a great cricket player. He played hockey well, he played tennis well. So you can almost say, I think AB de Villiers would come close from the modern day athletes. He was something else. So, from whatever stories I've heard, he was playing in Desapriya Park, which is a very old and renowned park in South Calcutta area. It's a big park as well. You have Durga Pujas and stuff there. You have cricket coaching camps, football coaching camps, everything there. So he was playing there in the 40s, and basically the Mohan Bagan officials scouted him from there. They saw what they liked when he was playing there, and they took him under their wings and asked him to join the Mohan Bagan youth team in the mid 40s, and then from there he did well in the youth team and came into the senior setup in the 50s, and then he played for India. He was captain for India in that famous 1962 Asian Games campaign where India won gold in football in the Asian Games. Then he also captained Bengal in the Santosh Trophy, and Bengal were like, I think you can compare Bengal's performance in the Santosh Trophy to Mumbai's performance in the Ranji Trophy, where I think they have been so dominant. I think Mumbai has won about 40 Ranji Trophies, and Bengal would be like that. They would have won about 20-25 Santosh Trophies, if not more. I'm not really sure about the exact figure, but they have been the most dominant team in the Santosh Trophy. So he captained Bengal in cricket, he captained Bengal in football. He was captain of the Bengal Ranji Trophy team, which reached the finals of the Ranji Trophies in 1971-72. He was a bowling all-rounder. From whatever I've heard, he was a seam bowling all-rounder. He could bat a bit, but his main skill was bowling. So he was a great talent, and the best thing about him is that even though the rivalry between East Bengal and Mohan Bagan from what it is now, it was much more intense in the 50s and 60s. It was like at a complete different level. And even East Bengal fans really revered him because of the player he was on the field and his contribution overall to Indian football. Basically transcended that rivalry. And the best thing was he was a one-club man. I don't know how true it is, but Tottenham Hotspur asked for a trial, and he basically, you can't say rejected them, but obviously he turned them down politely and said, I'm going to continue my career in Mohan Bagan. So that's how the legend goes. So it's a great thing. And obviously he retired in, I think, 67 or 68. He retired scoring more than 200 goals for Mohan Bagan, won 9 Calcutta League titles, about 4 or 5 IFA Shields, won a lot, won everything, won the Durand Cup multiple times, won the Rovers Cup multiple times. It's whatever you could win in Indian football, he has won it. Obviously, he didn't have the National League at that point in time, otherwise he would have done that as well. So it was...
From what I'm hearing, I obviously know he was a great footballer, and I knew that he represented the Bengal Ranji Trophy team, which is a great thing. I mean, I don't think any modern player would be able to, or it'd be rather very difficult to do that. But the fact that he even played hockey just adds to. I think he was a real gem to Calcutta society in terms of him being a personality as well, and how much he felt close to, as you mentioned, his club Mohan Bagan and Bengal as a whole, that he rejected. I'm not, as you said, there's no real thing to state that it's actually true or not. But if even Tottenham came in for him, the love maybe he had for the Bagan fans, or how he wanted to stay local, I think, I don't know, that kind of loyalty seems very Francesco Totti to me. That's probably the only figure I can compare in that sense, of having that kind of a loyalty to a particular club or place.
And in modern day football, it's, I think, not even rare, but it's impossible to find that kind of loyalty.
So I don't think Totti played 3 sports at a national level, if that makes sense. So that's just great. I mean, I didn't really know about so many things about Chuni Goswami. I think even PK Banerjee recently passed away, so it's a big loss for Indian football recently.
PK Banerjee passed away, I think, just before the lockdown,
Yeah.
early March, I think. So obviously, span of 2 months, 1.5 months, we've lost two of the greatest stalwarts of Indian football. And basically, you can say there were two of the holy trinity of Indian football.
Yeah.
The other being Tulsidas Balaram, who is obviously still with us, but obviously he's also in that same age bracket and obviously still there, so that's good.
That's definitely very interesting. I mean, another thing I wanted to talk to you about is on a lighter subject rather. It's about the Mohan Bagan and ATK unity. Just wanted to know, being Bengal local, being there all your life, how do you see like one of the biggest, if not the biggest club in Indian football, going into a partnership with one of the rival clubs in ATK?
See, now the current model of Indian football, economically, it becomes very difficult. Otherwise, if you want to play in the ISL, the amount of money and investment which needs to be done by any club, be that an I-League club who wants to come up to ISL level or even the existing ISL franchises, is a big deal. So it becomes really very difficult unless you have that corporate backing to really be able to do that. So, and Mohan Bagan, as you said, the stature of the club, the history of the club, after AFC announced the ISL as the top league of the country, they had to play in the ISL only. Previously they were pretty fine, both East Bengal and Mohan Bagan playing in the I-League, and they were fighting for, say, a unified league, or at least the I-League being given the top league status over ISL. But ultimately that didn't go through, that didn't happen. The AFC declared the ISL as the top league at the beginning of this season. So this had to happen. Becomes really difficult to get investors to, say, spend about 50 lakhs on an average season. So obviously I think the merger, now that they've merged with ATK, the one good thing is that at least the owners of ATK are local people. They're all Calcutta people, so they would know the sentiments of the local sentiments of the fans regarding the merger and how they should go about it, and what kind of a treatment this merger needs to happen. So that's why that's good. But otherwise, if you have someone who's not a local guy, it becomes much more difficult to understand the pulse of the local fans, and it's a very sensitive issue. Obviously, there are a lot of fans who are in agreement the merger was the best decision, but there are fans obviously who would not like it, even though they also know the truth. It would be difficult to play without the merger. But obviously, let's see how it works out. But hoping it's going to be a long-term one.
Like you mentioned that if the legacy club wanted to survive, they had to take sort of a corporate route. Do you think that, so there are other older clubs as well, let's say Mohammedan or Salgaonkar or these kind of clubs? Do you think that they would also have to revert? And I wouldn't say maybe getting a corporate investor, but we've seen how clubs generally merge themselves into being one franchise. It's very similar. This happened in the ISL. Something, let's say, with Pune dissolving and Hyderabad FC forming. Do you think that these clubs will also have to take that similar route to keep existence, or do you think that they would rather dissolve than be a part of these new franchises?
If you see the traditional clubs of Goa, like, say, Salgaonkar, Dempo, Sporting Club de Goa, obviously Churchill Brothers is still there playing in the I-League, but the other clubs which I mentioned before Churchill, the three of Salgaonkar, Dempo and Sporting Club de Goa, they don't play anymore in the I-League. They obviously have become feeder clubs for FC Goa, and they basically, their main aim now is to play in the local leagues of Goa and develop the local talents, scout from local, get them into their clubs, develop them, and then ultimately push them into the FC Goa setup if they can, and if they are able to do it the right way. So that's their main role now. And in Calcutta also, if you see, the big three are also pretty much struggling. Mohan Bagan had to take this route of merger to be in the top league. And now East Bengal is also trying desperately hard to get a new investor on board so that they can at least also come up in the ISL. Mohammedan Sporting, they are in the I-League second division, and they obviously were doing pretty well this season before the lockdown happened, and ultimately, unfortunately, the league had to be cancelled. Otherwise, they were good contenders to be promoted to the I-League this season. I don't know, maybe before the beginning of next season, there's going to be some sort of a playoff system of the teams who were doing well this season in the I-League second division, so that at least those teams have a chance of getting promoted into the I-League for the next season. So if that happens, at least Mohammedan Sporting has a chance of coming into the I-League and in time maybe to the ISL, because whatever plans the AFC put out, I think from the 2024 season onwards, they have said you can't have two parallel leagues anymore, you need to have one unified league. So ultimately it's going towards a unified league, but obviously it's still 2 or 3 seasons off. So for the time being, it's going to be the I-League and ISL. But obviously if the big three don't play in the I-League anymore, it's anyways going to get relegated to the status of a second tier league. So even if you don't have a unified league, I think all the focus will in any way be on the ISL if both East Bengal and Mohan Bagan get in there. I don't think anyone would even be following the I-League after that.
True. I mean, you raised the points of how clubs like Dempo and Salgaonkar are now concentrating on youth development and how they want to get the Goan talents into FC Goa, and they see that as a representation of Goa. But I think I'm not sure how much truth there is to this, but the club ownership at at Dempo said that we aren't taking steps towards participating in the league format because we don't understand the clear roadmap that's been put out by the AIFF right now. We still feel that there may be some discrepancies, that they may go back on their word or change the way that they're looking at the roadmap right now. That's why we don't want to invest so much money in playing a couple of seasons which may be pointless for us. So, which is a totally understandable thing on their standpoint, because if you look at Dempo, I think they've been one of the most successful clubs in the short time they've actually played professional football, in the terms of how many trophies they've won, the league systems, and the players they produced and things like that.
Yeah, the thing is, when the ISL started in 2014, I think the ownership of FC Goa was Srinivas Dempo, Ataraj Salgaonkar, and a few other parties. So they were in any case stakeholders for FC Goa. So it didn't make any sense for them to be playing ISL, or they couldn't as well, because they had that one city, one team rule at that point in time in place as well. So there could only be one team from Goa. And basically Dempo and Salgaonkar became feeder clubs because the owners were already FC Goa owners as well. But now that I think they have sold off their stake in FC Goa, both Dempo and Salgaonkar. So now they obviously would want to play the top league as well, since they have been so successful in the I-League over the years. And as you said, they're not really keen because they don't find a lot of clarity in the roadmap which has been put out. But I think on the 2024 season onwards, if the unified league really happens, then we can see at least a proper league, like we expect to see, say, about 10-15 teams or close to 20 teams, and it's going to be a proper league then.
Nirvanda, there's something I've been wondering. So there have been so many people who are unhappy with the roadmap that the AFF is taking. Like in the sense that it's been so long, and even now we are being made to wait for the unified league. So I've always wondered this: why hasn't there been another candidate who stood up to compete against Praful Patel in terms of the leadership position at AIFF? Or is it just internal politics that he has the whole backroom staff with him and he just gets vetoed at every meeting that happens? Do you have any insight into the whole the leadership structure at AIFF?
He, being a political person, obviously would enjoy quite a bit of clout regarding that. And now that I think he's also gone to, he's a part of FIFA, if I'm not wrong. FIFA, he's holding some sort of a position. And after he's been able to achieve that, it's become much more difficult for others to basically displace him. But obviously with time, he obviously will go and there's going to be another successor. But as of now, it looks difficult, and he's been there for quite a long time. And
like I feel that the BCCI have taken a step in the right direction by hiring someone I really admire in Saurav Ganguly. I think he is one of the most well thought of people in the cricket world, and I think he has some really good ideas for Indian cricket and cricket as a whole, because I think the BCCI are one of the most stronger people when it comes to the board of members in the ICC. But I just think that the AIFF can just take a leaf off the book of the BCCI, because I did understand that there was a certain level of corruption in the BCCI as well, as there is in any hierarchical structure at some point. But at least they're taking steps in the right direction of getting, at least clearing the mess in some ways, of getting right people in the jobs. So I just feel that for the sport to progress, that that would have been a great step if they hired someone of footballing ability. Because I think I heard this somewhere that Baichung Bhutia was actually, I'm not sure how much truth there is to this, but he was contemplating standing for the position. But then people raised this argument that he obviously has a stake at BBFS, Baichung Bhutia Football Schools. So how can he actually hold a position of such responsibility and things like that?
Yeah, there's going to be some conflict of interest or something of so. But yeah, I think now the BCCI model after Lodha, I think, is the model to follow. If that can be done, because they have cleansed up that system of having politicians in power at the helm of each and every sporting federation. So it's good that a cricketer is the BCCI president. If that can be done with the AIFF, that's I think that's also going to be great. But the problem with the AIFF is that if you compare with the BCCI, obviously it's not comparable. The thing is regarding the finances, because the BCCI being one of the richest boards in world cricket, the AIFF is seriously lagging in that respect. That's why they had to sign that deal in 2010 with Reliance, and obviously you can say FSDL are actually the decision maker Indian football. The AIFF is just like a statutory head sort of. So obviously money talks, and that's why the ISL came into being after that deal was signed between Reliance and AIFF, and obviously ISL has done a lot of good to Indian football as well, but the ISL model I'm not really a big fan of, because it follows that MLS or A-League model of the closed league sort of a model, franchising system where you have everything in-house. Means they are even for signing a player or signing a head coach, you have to take a decision from them. I don't think that's really a very good model to follow. That's the main issue with the ISL. Otherwise, also even the ISL clubs don't do a lot of good business regarding profits and stuff. They are all loss-making entities because they spend so much and there's hardly any inflow of revenue.
No, but one thing that frustrates me about the AIFF is that I understand that an organization can make mistakes. It's inevitable. I think organizations will make mistakes if they're trying to make decisions on such a large scale. But my problem is with the transparency, because I feel that I'm not sure you've heard the comments about Praful Patel, which he made in the inaugural press conference when the ISL was released. So he was asked this question that why have you come about with the concept of the ISL when there's already an I League in existence? So he said that this is sort of a booster dose to Indian football, and it will go away. We will re-establish the I League as the premier competition in Indian football. But just the fact that after that point, when anyone turned back to him in that question, so he said he hasn't really reverted to that. So in that sense, if there isn't a transparency between the leadership structure at an organization and the fans, I feel that that's generally going to be that's not going to be a good organization in terms of its workings and things like that.
Yeah, in 2014, when the ISL plan was floated, I remember what you're mentioning, Praful Patel saying it's like the IPL and it's going to be kind of a glitzy tournament, a masala tournament, just to give a boost to the image of football in the country and basically drag a lot of eyeballs from cricket to football. So that's why we are doing this. But our flagship tournament is going to be the I League, which is basically the top league or the proper league of the country. This is just like a sort of a marketing coup sort of a thing. So obviously FSDL or Reliance being the marketing partners of the AIFF, and almost it's a given. Almost all the funding of the AIFF come from Reliance or FSDL only. So obviously the FSDL are in charge and they are the sole decision makers, and whatever they see fit they do. And I don't think Praful Patel has much of a choice either regarding that.
When you mentioned money talks, I think that is the whole case with the AIFF, because I think again I'm just citing paper articles that I've read. I'm not sure how much truth they have to them, but it does seem fitting, because I think when these club owners came to Praful Patel, the John Abraham and Ranveer Kapoor and the list of other celebrities who had an interest in buying a football club, Praful Patel showed them the part of the I League that we already have an established league, and why don't you buy stake or maybe just establish leagues clubs into this league structure. So he said that no, that's very poorly run. We want to create a new competition as a whole and things like that. And that, I mean, I think that just took away all the power that Praful Patel has right there, because how can anyone compete with what the Ambanis are offering in that sense? I don't think the Prime Minister can even compete in this country. So it's very difficult to say that the head of football will have any chance in that case.
Yeah, the AIFF is basically responsible about shooting themselves in the foot regarding this, balance of power sort of a thing, because before they signed this deal with Reliance in 2010 or 2012, the I League, the erstwhile NFL, which was the National League then, which started in 1990. Starting the National League was a great step on their part. They started it in 1996 to start an All India top-tier competition, asking clubs from all over India to come and participate. That was a great idea. But the thing they should have done then is to properly market that league, which they didn't do. They didn't get decent broadcasters for the league, and that put them back immensely. And that's why when they see after a few seasons of the NFL, nothing much is happening in terms of revenue or even obviously the viewership was there in the pockets, the traditional pockets of football in India, like say Calcutta, Goa, to a certain extent the south, or in the north, Punjab and those areas. That viewership was always there. But other than that, popularizing the game throughout the country didn't happen, and they were anyways second best to cricket. So they had to ultimately, even they rebranded the NFL to the I League. I think that happened in 2007. So even after the rebranding, they failed to market it properly and promote it properly in the right sense too. Because you can compare that to the, say, Old English First Division and the Premier League. After the Premier League started, they opened up the entire league, and there was so much of foreign influx in terms of players. Then later on, foreign owners started coming in, and ultimately now it has become probably the richest league, or at least one of the richest leagues in the world. So the strength of the Premier League lies in its marketing ability. It's such a well-marketed league. And the I-League or the National League lagged behind in that respect. The marketing aspect of the league was not done properly by the AIFF. They didn't give much importance to that, and that set them back by a long way. And then they ultimately are forced to sign that deal with Reliance for being their marketing partners, and obviously then the funding starts coming in from Reliance. Reliance tries to market the I-League. Obviously, they realize it's not really possible to do that. They decide to entirely come up with a new concept, which is close to the IPL, and start their own league, so that at least they can basically give a facelift to Indian football and grab more eyeballs than it had previously.
Like to a layman's perspective, like I mean, if you're walking into football and you have no idea of how football is run in other countries and things like that, it would be good to say that okay, this is the concept of the IPL, it works very well, why don't we just copy paste it into football? Most cases that would work, but then the thing is that when you come into football isn't tournament based. That's not what the interest in football is. It's very tribal. It's the fact that you support your team for 9 months in a year and even think about them in the rest of the 3 months, if that makes sense. You're totally obsessed by that particular club, and if that doesn't come naturally to you, you can't just make a franchise out of it, which plays for 3 months in a year, and expect there to be a lot of viewership or even fandom associated with that. So I understand where they may have thought the idea would have been beneficial, but I just don't think that they were educated enough in a footballing perspective to make it work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think even personally, I would have liked FSDL or Reliance to basically, after they came on board as marketing partners of the AIFF, to market the I-League much better, the way they are doing with the ISL, which AIFF couldn't do in their own capacity, to do that for the AIFF. And say, because the I-League, when they came on board, say around 2010, 2012, the I-League or the NFL had quite a few seasons before that. So there's already been sort of a fan base for that, even though that was a very clustered or very area-specific fan base, like the traditional pockets of Indian football. But I think if they had marketed but that also would be difficult because, as you know, the clubs, basically the legacy clubs in Calcutta or even the other old clubs in Indian football, the ownership is not always really. In Calcutta, the big three are like community clubs. So in that way, you don't have a certain rich corporate owner or something of that sort. It's basically owned by the fans and the members of the club, which has been happening for the last 100 years. And even the other older clubs in India, like the clubs of Goa and all, their ownership was also like difficult to deal with for probably the FSDL. So I don't know how that would have or that could have been done, but personally speaking, I would have liked them to keep the I League and maybe increase the number of clubs in that league, because it's always been say about 10 12 currently, or I think it was a bit more earlier. There would have been about 14 15 clubs max. So even if they had managed to bring in a few more clubs, maybe have a league of about 16 18 clubs, increase the number of clubs in the I League to 16 or 18 teams, they would have at least had a proper league like you have in the other countries or in the European countries. But this ISL model, I'm not really a big fan of, because as you say, it's just for 3 months and people really are unable to. Football is like it's not like a 3-1 thing. It's like
Exactly, yeah.
throughout the year thing, and it's like for years on. It's not like a 2-year or 5-year or 10-year cycle. It's going to be like throughout your lifetime. It's going to be with you. So obviously,
Anirban, it was great speaking to you. I think we had a great conversation. I would just like to leave you if you have any last comments that you'd like to make, any book recommendations, anything for the viewers, anything you'd like to point out.
It was good fun speaking with you as well. I think I'm doing this for the first time, so it was a good experience for me as well.
I'm glad to be here too. So.
Obviously, it's obviously enjoyable speaking football.
Yeah.
In whatever form be that, or whenever be the time, it's always good fun to talk about football, and obviously it picks your brains about the different aspects of football. And what I would like to say is people should follow football in India. Obviously, it's still miles behind cricket, but with the ISL now, I see a lot of people taking interest in football. A lot of youngsters have started following football much more closely. Earlier, the people who only used to follow, say, the European leagues are now also following the ISL in equal measure as well. So that's a good thing, and that's like a step in the right direction. And if it keeps on increasing with each passing day and passing year, it's only going to be beneficial for the game. Yeah. And I hope we manage to at least next season looks pretty difficult as of now, but at least even if it's delayed or even behind closed doors, obviously we won't be able to watch games in the stadiums in the immediate future, but at least watching them on live games on TV is equally entertaining and exciting. So I hope at least the season starts sometime, even if it's delayed, at least it starts and it happens. So I'm waiting for the next season as well, like everyone else. And this season is nearly done. FC Goa are going to be. Next season we will be seeing the first participant from India in the AFC Champions League, which would be FC Goa, which is going to be like a huge deal. And I personally would be following the continental competitions because FC Goa's participation in the AFC Champions League, and obviously ATK Mohan Bagan is also going to play in the AFC Cup, I think. And another team, the runners-up of ISL, are also going to be in the playoffs of the AFC Cup. So it's going to be good fun following those. And it was good fun speaking to you as well. So
same here. All right. I hope I get you on the podcast at a later date. Maybe talk about some other topics about Indian football, European football, or just anything as a whole. Thanks for coming on the podcast again. Thank you.
Bye.